The last time anyone saw Emily Hart and Claire Rowe, they were smiling for a picture. 5 hours later, they were gone. And 5 years later, we learned they weren't alone in that frame. The image was pulled from a scratched SD card found in the side pocket of a faded hiking pack. At first glance, it's an ordinary trail snapshot. 2 teenage girls framed by sunlit pines. Emily is in front, braid over her shoulder, squinting slightly at the light. Claire stands behind, her hand resting gently on Emily's shoulder, her baseball cap pulled low. They look relaxed, confident, exactly how you'd expect 2 experienced hikers to look in the Colorado backcountry. But zoom in, and between the trees behind them, the light doesn't fall the way it should. There's a shape in the shadows, bulging, irregular, not quite human, not quite animal. It could be nothing, a trick of the branches, a warped silhouette caused by the wind. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That picture was taken at 3:14 p.m. on June 12, 2018. By 8 o'clock that night, Emily and Claire had vanished without a trace. They were 17 disciplined hikers with years of backcountry experience. They carried GPS beacons, bear spray, extra food, and a fully mapped route. They'd called home from a ridge just after noon. Reception was patchy, but the words were clear enough. "We're fine, Mom. We'll be at camp by 5. By nightfall, they hadn't checked in. By midnight, the first search team was on the trail. The camp was found 3 hours later, and that was where the unease began. It wasn't messy. It wasn't looted by wildlife. It wasn't even lived in. 2 tents zipped, a cold fire pit with no ash, as though it had never been lit. 2 pairs of boots side by side, laces tucked neatly inside. Water bottles, full, and in the hard-packed dirt between the tents. Footprints, Emily's and Claire's, and over them, something larger. Not boot tread, not bare feet. Something wide, crescent-shaped, with 3 shallow grooves where toes should have been. Could be elk, one ranger said quickly. But elk don't leave prints this close together. And they don't walk through a campsite without scattering gear. The prints were photographed. But when the images came back, the impressions looked fainter, as if the ground had decided to erase them. Dogs picked up the girl's scent, but only for 100 yards from camp before it vanished completely. No scraps of fabric, no drop gear, no sign of a fall or injury. On the 3rd day, the SD card was logged into evidence. It sat unnoticed until the search wound down, and an analyst finally scrolled through its contents. The usual shots: rocks, trees, lunch by a stream. And then, the 3:14 p.m. photo. When the analyst cropped it and lightened the background, the figure in the shadows sharpened just enough to give it form. Her friend in Denver said it best after enhancing the image: "You should show this to someone who knows about wildlife, because that thing's standing too still." The picture was filed away, never released to the public. 5 years later, when a hunter made a grisly discovery deep in the still grove, the photo was pulled from storage, and the shadow behind the girls no longer looked like a trick of the light. It looked like the beginning of something still waiting under the pines. In Whetstone, Colorado, the forest doesn't just surround the town. It watches it from the grocery store parking lot. You can see the first slope of the Whetstone Range rising like a wall of green. The pine line is sharp, almost unnatural, as though the trees have been told exactly where to stop. The locals don't look at it much. Or if they do, they don't stare for long. It's a small community. Fewer than 1,800 residents. Everyone knows everyone's kids, everyone's cars, and more importantly, everyone's stories. When Emily Hart and Claire Rowe disappeared, the story spread faster than the official search updates. Theories mutated with every retelling. After the first week, the question stopped being, when will they be found? And became, where were they taken? The word taken caught on. People whispered it over coffee, in the aisles of the hardware store, out on the porch steps at night. Sheriff Dana Lorne hated that word. It implied someone had the girls, someone who could still be caught. And she hated the other thing the townspeople whispered even more: a name, Stillgrove. It wasn't on any official map. It wasn't a marked trail. It wasn't even a single location, but an uncharted quadrant of the Whetstone Wilderness that hunters, rangers, and old-timers all agreed on without having to say out loud. For disappearances in 15 years, all inside Still Grove. No bodies recovered. No personal effects found outside of what could be explained as lost gear. It was the kind of place people pretended didn't exist until they had to talk about it. One old trapper named Fletcher Croft had put it best in an interview years before Emily and Claire were even born. You walk in there and the air changes. No birds, no bugs. Even your own breathing sounds different, like the forest is holding it for you, deciding whether to give it back. Sheriff Lauren wasn't one for superstition, but she couldn't ignore the facts. And the facts were bad. In 2003, a solo hiker named Jason Keene vanished on a 2-day trip. His campsite was found, his bag still zipped, his boots under a tarp. In 2008, a married couple disappeared during a fall foliage hike. Their picnic basket was recovered, unopened. In 2014, a forestry volunteer failed to return from trail maintenance. His radio was found, battery drained, microphone cord neatly coiled. When Emily and Claire went missing in 2018, the search crews worked every inch of the mountain, except Still Grove. At least, not without caution. One SAR volunteer told a reporter, off the record, "It's not that we don't go in there. It's that we don't go in there alone. And we don't go in after dark." The SD card from Emily's pack should have been the lead that drove the investigation forward. Instead, it became just another item in a growing file that no one wanted to touch. It sat there, buried in paperwork, until the 5th anniversary of the girl's disappearance, when a hunter named Marcus Devereaux walked into Still Grove after an elk and came out with something no one in Whetstone was ready to see. Something pale, something human, and something metallic lodged deep inside it, like the forest had been keeping it safe. Now, if you've made it this far, you're the kind of person who needs answers as badly as we do. Make sure you're subscribed, because the deeper we go, the darker the story gets. 5 years after Emily Hart and Claire Rowe vanished, the mountain finally gave something back. June 12, 2023. The anniversary. The locals had stopped holding candlelight vigils by year 3. They'd stopped posting the missing flyers by year 4. By year 5, most people in Whetstone had stopped talking about the girls at all, but not Marcus Devereaux. Marcus was a hunter, 42, lived alone on the north edge of town in a cabin his father had built. He didn't much care for people, but he knew the mountain like it was part of him. That morning, he was tracking an elk through the thickest part of Still Grove, miles past where most hunters were willing to go. The forest was strange that day. The air felt heavier, not humid, exactly, but charged. Pine needles muffled every step. No bird calls. No wind through the branches. Marcus moved slow, rifle low, eyes scanning for the elk's track. The animal's prints led him down a narrow slope and into a shallow basin where moss grew thick over the soil. It was there that his boot caught on something hard, something that didn't belong. He cursed, stumbled, then crouched to see what it was. At first, he thought it was antler, pale, curved, smooth in places, pitted in others. But as he brushed away the moss and pine needles, his stomach went cold. It wasn't antler. It was bone. He pulled back more earth. A human radius bone, weathered to an unnatural beige. And jutting out from the middle of it, a strip of rusted metal, fused into the bone like it had been driven there long before death. It wasn't loose. It wasn't something that had pierced the body after burial. It was part of the bone now. Marcus didn't touch it again. He marked the spot, backed out the way he'd come, and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dana Lauren met him in the parking lot. "Marcus, I found a bone. Human, and you're not going to like what's stuck in it." "Lauren, where?" "Marcus, Still Grove." Pause. "Lauren, show me." By that evening, the basin was crawling with law enforcement and forensics. They sealed the perimeter, pushed lights into the underbrush, and began a careful excavation. The soil was damp, cool to the touch even in the summer heat. The bone came out first, photographed, bagged, and handed to the coroner. The rusted metal was more troubling. It was thin, wedge-shaped, and stamped faintly with letters and numbers. Part No. H. 34/Department of Forestry. The forensics tech, a young guy named Hansen, stared at it too long before finally saying, "I've seen this before in old trapping manuals. It's part of a leg hold trap." Sheriff Lorne frowned. "They've been banned for decades." Hansen nodded. "Yeah, which makes it even weirder that one was still out here." The coroner's preliminary ID came back 2 days later. The bone belonged to Emily Hart. For 5 years, the mountain had kept her hidden, and when it finally gave her back, it came with a question no one wanted to answer. Who put a forestry trap around a teenage girl's arm? And why was it buried so deep in Still Grove? The metal in Emily Hart's bone wasn't random. It was built, labeled, and designed to close on something that fought back. The coroner's office in Gunnison is small. 2 autopsy tables, a steel refrigerator, and a faint smell of antiseptic that clings to the air no matter how hard they clean. That's where Emily Hart's radius bone sat, in a shallow evidence tray under harsh fluorescent light. As Dr. Paul Evers leaned in to study it, Evers had worked in Colorado for 22 years. He'd seen animal attacks, climbing accidents, even a plane crash in '09. But this was different. The metal wasn't just lodged in the bone. It was fused, like the bone had grown around it. He called Sheriff Lorne the moment he confirmed it. "Evers, this didn't happen after she died. This was in her when she was alive." "Lorne, you're sure?" "Evers, positive. You can see the remodeling in the tissue. The body tried to heal around it." That meant 2 things. 1, Emily survived whatever put that metal in her arm. And 2, she lived with it for at least several days before she died. The next step was the metal itself. Hansen, the forensic tech who'd been on site with Marcus, had already sent high-res photos to the state lab. It came back with an ID faster than anyone expected. The piece was part of an H-34 forestry restraint trap, a model banned in 1979 after a series of incidents, both fatal and unexplained. The old design was brutal. 2 steel jaws, spring-loaded, triggered by pressure on a central plate. They were built for apex predators, wolves, cougars, but could snap shut on anything that stepped in with enough force to shatter bone. This one had been modified. The original serrated teeth were gone, replaced with smooth steel ridges. Still lethal, but harder to trace injuries to a specific pattern. And the trigger plate had been filed down, making it sensitive enough to spring at the weight of a human foot. There was something else. The stamping, Part No. H-34/Department of Forestry, wasn't standard. According to archival records, only a handful of traps ever carried government markings. They were prototypes, field-tested in a single district, Whetstone Wilderness, 1976 to 1978. When Sheriff Lorne heard that, she sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. She knew the name tied to those tests. Everyone in town over the age of 50 did. Harold Greaves, forestry contractor, 6'4", always seen in a ranger hat. Worked Whetstone for 15 years. Until the summer, he vanished without a trace. No body, no explanation, and no one had ever confirmed what happened to the equipment he'd been issued. When Hansen dug deeper into the archives, he found something the official records had left out. 3 separate incident reports from 77 and 78. All hikers, all claiming they'd stepped into traps in the Still Grove. 2 had broken ankles. 1 had a crushed shin. But each report mentioned something that made Lorne's skin crawl. After the trap closed, we heard chains dragging, not just from the trap, from somewhere deeper in the woods. And now, decades later, Emily Hart's bone had brought one of those chains back to surface. Before Emily and Claire disappeared, people saw them talking to a tall man in a ranger hat. The problem? No such ranger was working that trail. The rumor started with a store clerk. Her name was Terabelle, and she'd been stocking shells at the whetstone generally the afternoon before the girls left for their hike. She told investigators she saw Emily and Claire in the snack aisle, loading trail mix and jerky into their baskets, and that they weren't alone. Tara, he was tall, really tall, had to be 6'4", maybe 6'5", old canvas jacket, green like the Rangers wear, and one of those flat brim hats. But his gear looked old. Not vintage like for fun, old like he'd been wearing it for decades. At the time, no one thought much of it. Hikers talked to people in the store all the time, and the official roster for the Whetstone Ranger Station didn't list anyone matching that description. Still, Tara swore she'd seen the man point to something on Claire's paper map before they left. 2 other witnesses came forward after the first news reports. One was a gas station attendant who remembered seeing 2 girls with a tall guy filling water bottles from the outdoor spigot at 7:30 a.m. the morning they left. The other was a pair of bird watchers who claimed they'd passed a group on the trail just before noon. Bird watcher 1, he didn't say a word, just nodded as we went by. But the girls seemed to be listening to him, like really listening. Bird watcher 2, I thought maybe he was a guide or something, but there was no badge, no name tag, and those boots, they were ancient, cracked leather, laces all frayed. No one hikes in boots like that anymore. When Sheriff Lauren heard those accounts, she felt a knot form in her stomach. The man they were describing sounded uncomfortably close to the archival photos of Harold Greaves, the forestry contractor from the 1970s whose traps had been banned and whose disappearance had never been explained. Greaves had been a large man, 6'4", broad shoulders, known for wearing his ranger hat even in town, and for carrying outdated gear long after newer models came in. The last confirmed sighting of him had been in the summer of 1978, heading into the Still Grove. Lauren pulled the old personnel file. Black and white headshot, high cheekbones, expression flat. His eyes were the thing that got her. Even in the faded print, they seemed to look right past the camera, as though the lens was just something in the way. The file also contained something unusual. A handwritten note from a former supervisor. Greaves insists the old traps are still useful. Claims he's caught things no one else has seen. Recommends suspension if he continues unauthorized field work. The things were never elaborated on, at least not in the official record. But a retired wildlife officer, Claire's uncle Tom O'Hara, remembered the band well. Lauren met him at his cabin on the outskirts of town. It was stacked with antlers, pelts, and old ranger manuals that smelled faintly of mildew when she brought up the trap in Emily's bone. O'Hara's face went tight. O'Hara, you found one of his traps, didn't you? Lauren, we think so. O'Hara, they didn't just pull those things because of hikers getting hurt. They pulled them because every time they buried one, something would dig it up again. Lauren frowned. Lauren, animals? O'Hara, no, not animals. Long pause. O'Hara, he said the ground in Still Grove had a memory, that if you left something in it, it wouldn't stay buried unless it wanted it to. The more she pressed, the stranger his recollections became. O'Hara spoke of chain sounds at night, of finding traps reset after they'd been dismantled, and of seeing Greaves in places no vehicle could reach. Always alone, always watching from a distance. O'Hara, last time I saw him, it was raining hard. He was standing dead center on the trail. Didn't have a poncho, didn't even blink at the rain. And I swear, when I looked away and looked back, he was gone, just gone. No sound, no tracks in the mud. After that, O'Hara left the Forestry Service. Said the Still Grove wasn't worth what it asked from you. Now, decades later, witnesses were putting a man with Greaves' exact build and clothing on the same trail as Emily and Claire within hours of their disappearance. Lauren didn't believe in ghosts. She didn't believe in cursed ground or traps that dug themselves back up, but she did believe in patterns. And this one was bad. The trouble was, if Greaves was alive, he'd be in his late 70s. And if he was dead, then someone or something was wearing his hat. 3 days after Marcus found Emily's bone, Another discovery was made 2 miles deeper into the still grove. Cadaver dogs had picked up a faint scent trail, and at the end of it, buried shallow under the roots of a fallen pine, was a skull, still wearing a corroded nylon headlamp. The batteries had long since ruptured. The bone structure matched Claire Rowe. Her jaw was fractured. Her parka was folded neatly beneath her body, as though placed there after death, and her right femur had been cut clean in half, not broken. Cut. The forest had given them back both girls. But now it was clear it hadn't given them back everything. They followed the trail they thought the girls had taken, but halfway in, the forest showed them a trail it wanted them to take instead. The still grove wasn't the kind of place you wandered into without a plan. Even in late summer, the undergrowth grew in dense tangles, swallowing the ground in waist-high ferns and thorn vines. The trees leaned close over a narrow trail, their branches knitting into a roof that blocked most of the sky. It was a kind of silence that didn't feel empty, it felt aware. Sheriff Lorne Marcus Hill and 2 deputies began their search at first light. The GPS pings from the girls' cell phones in 2018 had given them a rough starting point. From there, the plan was to follow what the girls' map had shown, a 7-mile loop that cut to the northern ridge before circling back toward their campsite. But within 30 minutes, they realized something was wrong. The official trail, Maple Hollow, had been deliberately blocked. A pile of rotting branches had been dragged across it, not the kind of thing wind or storms could make. These were stacked in a way that formed a crude barricade. Marcus crouched and brushed away the leaves. Marcus. These branches were cut. Clean slice, hatchet, maybe a saw. Lorne, how old? Marcus. Months, maybe a year. But this trail was shut on purpose. Instead of Maple Hollow, a faint path curved away to the east. Barely visible, just a narrow thread of trampled grass between the ferns. If you didn't know it was there, you could walk past it 12 times. And that was the problem. It wasn't on any map. Deputy Ramos. You thinking what I'm thinking? Lorne, the girls didn't just get lost. The path pulled them downhill toward a part of Still Grove no one had surveyed in decades. Their radios hissed with static. By the time they were half a mile in, GPS dropped out entirely. Marcus kept stopping. Not because he was tired. He was scanning the ground. Every so often, he'd find impressions in the soil. Not fresh, but deep, as if something heavy had rested there. Some were circular, for inches wide. Others were oddly squared off. He didn't say what he was thinking. Not yet. At the 1-mile mark, they found the first sign of something human. A stake of rusted steel, driven into the earth at an angle. It was half buried under moss. But when Marcus scraped it clean, it revealed a stamped number, 23. Ramos. What the hell is this? Survey marker. Marcus. Not unless the surveyor was trapping something that bites. The numbers got higher as they followed the hollow path. 26, 27, 28. Each one spaced about 60 yards apart, each in varying stages of decay. And every time they passed one, the wood seemed to close in tighter. At 29, they stopped dead. A clearing open, maybe 20 feet wide, and in the center sat a steel frame. A half-collapsed cage, 8 feet long, its bars bent inward like something had forced its way in. Not out, in. Marcus walked around it twice. On the third lap, he spotted a shape half buried in the soil near one corner. He dug with his hands until the dirt fell away from something cold and sharp. A corner plate, bolted to the frame. Stamped into metal, depict of Forestry/1977 field issue. Lorne, we're walking through someone's grid. Marcus, someone's hunting ground. The further they went, the more wrong it felt. Branches were bent at unnatural angles, like something tall had pushed them aside. Some trees had crude notches carved into them, 2 or 3 stacked vertically, markings that didn't match any hiking or forestry code Marcus knew. At 32, Marcus finally said what he'd been holding back. Marcus, those prints back there? The wide ones with the squared edges? That's trap chain drag, and there's a hell of a lot of it. The hollow path ended at a rise in the land. The slope was steep, the soil loamy. They climbed in silence until they reached the top and found themselves staring down into a ravine. The air there was colder, almost damp. A thin mist clung to the ground even though the day was warm. And across the ravine, partially hidden behind a tangle of fallen timber, was an opening in the earth. A cave. Marcus lifted his binoculars. The cave mouth was maybe 4 feet high, wide enough for 2 people to crouch through side by side. Inside, the darkness swallowed everything. But it was what lay outside the cave that made him lower the binoculars. A length of rusted chain, coiled neatly, like someone intended to use it again. Ramos, Sheriff? What do we do? Lorne, we mark the location. Then we get a team in here with gear. And we don't come back without more guns and people. As they turned to leave, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the hollow path hadn't led them to the cave by accident. It felt like they had been brought here, like the forest had funneled them down a route meant to be found. And now, the real question wasn't what was inside the cave. It was what might be standing just out of sight, watching them from the trees. They thought the cave would give them answers. It gave them something else instead, a question no one wanted to ask out loud. The cave mouth was smaller than it had looked from the ridge. Up close, you had to crouch low, almost crawl. The rock above was pitted and dark with lichen, and the air pushing out from inside felt wrong. Damp, stale, with a faint undercurrent of rust and something sweet gone sour. It was 2 days after they'd marked the location on the hollow path. Sheriff Lorne had brought in a specialized search and rescue unit, 4 men and 1 woman, all armed and fitted with helmet lamps, gloves, and respirators. Marcus Hill was with them. He wasn't the kind of man who stayed on the sidelines when something didn't add up. Lorne, this is a sweep, not a hero run. We map what we see, we get out. No one goes off radio. No one gets separated. The first 20 feet were narrow, the walls slick with moisture. The only sounds were boots scraping over stone and the occasional drip of water. The further they moved in, the colder it got, a drop you could feel in your teeth. The floor sloped down, and soon the light from the entrance faded into complete blackness. Then the tunnel widened. It opened into a low, broad chamber, maybe 30 feet across, the ceiling a jagged arch of limestone. Their helmet beams swept over piles of broken stone and dirt, but it was what lay against the far wall that stopped them cold. Chains, dozens of them, some thick as a man's wrist, others finer, all hanging from iron hooks driven deep into the rock. The chains weren't rusted through. Most were dark with oil, the kind you use to keep metal from corroding. Someone had been maintaining them. On the ground beneath the hooks, there were stains, not bright, not fresh, but unmistakable in color, deep brown that had seeped into the porous limestone. Blood, rescue tech. This wasn't for animals. Marcus, or if it was the kind of animal that screams like a person. They split into pairs, moving along opposite walls. The air seemed heavier here, like the oxygen itself was thicker. On the left wall, one of the techs found something else. A line of shallow notches carved into stone, each about 2 inches long. They were arranged in rows, 20 or 30 to a row, stretching across 10 feet of wall. Marcus crouched beside them. He ran a gloved hand over the grooves. Marcus, not decoration. Tallies. Someone was counting. On the far side of the chamber was a narrow alcove. At first glance, it looked like just another hollow in the wall, until a beam of light hit something reflective, a metal table. It was low and rectangular, its surface scarred with deep scratches. One leg had been crudely repaired with a length of rebar, wired in place. Beside it sat a plastic crate, and inside were tools. Bowl cutters, pliers, hacksaw blades still wrapped in oilcloth. Marcus didn't touch them. Instead, he pulled his light to the far end of the table, where a single object sat under a sheet of mildewed burlap. He peeled it back. A boot. It was a hiking boot, mud-caked but still intact. The laces were missing, and inside, a brittle scrap of paper, folded so many times that it softened at the creases. Marcus unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was cramped and shaky. Only 3 words. We saw them. Lorne, bag it now. Marcus, we saw who? Lorne, that's what I'm afraid to find out. They photographed everything, marked the chamber on their map, but none of them wanted to linger. The silence in that cave wasn't empty. It pressed on your skin, a silence that felt like it was listening back. As they made their way toward the exit, Marcus stopped again. On the right wall, almost invisible under a layer of soot or mold, was something drawn in charcoal, a rough circle with 8 jagged lines radiating from its edges. It was faint, like it had been there for years. He took a photo, but in the back of his mind, he thought he'd seen that symbol before. Not in Stillgrove, not in the county, but in an old missing persons case file from 3 states away. When they stepped back into daylight, none of them spoke for a long time. They stripped their gear, sealed it for evidence processing, and watched as the cave mouth disappeared behind the slope. But Marcus knew one thing. Whatever had happened to the girls in 2018, this cave wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the middle, and the end was still out there, waiting. If you've been following this trail into the dark, you're going to want to stay close. The next discovery will change everything they thought they knew about the cave and about Stillgrove itself. Subscribe now, so you don't miss what comes next. Sometimes the mountain speaks back, and sometimes it repeats the last thing you didn't want to hear. The descent into the Stillgrove cavern was like stepping through the mouth of something that had been waiting a long, long time to be fed. Marcus felt the temperature drop first, a breath of air so cold it seemed to cling to his skin. Lauren followed 2 steps behind, her flashlight beam cutting through a tunnel no wider than a coffin. Their boots scraped against loose rock, each sound amplified, swallowed, and returned by the cave's throat. At 20 feet in, the smell changed. It was faint, like wet copper and something faintly organic, but it carried that undeniable tang of old blood. Lorne, stop. Marcus, what is it? Lorne, listen. They froze. Somewhere ahead, water dripped steadily. But beneath that, there was something else. A low, hollow clank. Metal on stone. Marcus's hand tightened on the radio at his belt. The sound reminded him of the hunter's description from weeks earlier, chains moving where there shouldn't be any. He leaned closer to Lorne. Marcus, that's not water pipes. This deep, there's no infrastructure. Lorne, I know. They moved forward in short, deliberate steps, their light sweeping the walls. The stone here bore strange marks, long parallel scrapes at knee height, worn smooth over time, like something had been dragged through here again and again. 50 feet in, the tunnel opened abruptly into a chamber. The walls glittered with moisture, and the ceiling stretched high enough for their beams to vanish into shadow. At the far end of the chamber, a rusted chain dangled from a piton drilled directly into the rock. The end of the chain was empty. Evers's words came back unbidden to Marcus's mind. This trap was designed to hold something that fights back. Marcus approached the chain, crouching low. It was old, yes, decades at least, but parts of the links bore fresh scoring, as if they'd been twisted or struck against stone within the last few years. On the ground beneath it, something caught the light. A fragment of bone, small, no bigger than a finger segment, but with edges too clean to have been worn down by natural means. And lodged in its hollow was a sliver of steel, identical to the piece found in Emily's arm. Marcus. Lorne, this isn't from Emily. Lorne, then whose is it? Before Marcus could answer, his flashlight swept past the far wall and froze. There, carved into stone, were names. Hundreds of them, some barely legible, faded by moisture, others so recent the stone dust still clung around the letters. And among them, 2 names both of them had been carrying since the start. Emily Hart, Sophie Kramer. Lorne's pulse thudded in her ears. Lorne, who carved these? Marcus, or what made them carve it? As they scanned the wall, Marcus noticed something else. Each name was paired with a date. For most, the gap between first and second date was only days, sometimes hours. The implication was too grim to say out loud. But Emily and Sophie's entries were different. Their first date, August 14th, 2018, the day they vanished. Their second date was blank. Marcus swallowed hard. Marcus, if these dates mark deaths. Lorne, then someone's still keeping score? A sound behind them made both whip around. The same metallic clank, but closer now, reverberating in the chamber like a heartbeat. Lorne's beam landed on the tunnel they'd just come through. Empty. She exhaled slowly. Lorne, Marcus, I don't think we're alone down here. They backed toward the far wall, light sweeping every shadow. The sound stopped. The silence was worse. Then, from somewhere deep within the stone, came something neither of them could explain. A faint voice, distorted and hollow, repeating the same 3 words over and over, in a tone stripped of all human warmth. Turn back now. It wasn't just an echo. It was a recording, and whoever had placed it here knew that anyone who reached this far wouldn't listen. That's when Marcus noticed a thin, barely visible wire snaking from the corner of the chamber into the rock wall. It vanished into a small, circular hole, far too precise to be natural. Marcus, Lorne, this isn't just a cave. It's been wired. Lorne didn't like the way his voice broke on the last word, because if the cave was wired, it meant 2 possibilities, and neither of them were good. Either this place had been turned into a hunting ground, or it was a prison, and both meant the same thing. Someone had been maintaining it. Before they could investigate further, a sharp, metallic snap rang out from the darkness beyond the chamber. Marcus's beam caught a flash of movement, low, fast, mechanical. A trap had just been triggered. Only problem was, neither of them had moved. Some traps are designed to catch prey. Others are meant to see who's foolish enough to come looking. The sound was sharp, metallic, like a jaw snapping shut. It echoed down the stone corridors, a sound so sudden and precise that both Marcus and Lorne froze in place, hearts hammering against their ribs. Marcus's eyes darted to the floor, searching for wires or pressure plates. Nothing. But 20 feet away, just at the edge of his flashlight's reach, a steel jaw trap now lay closed, its teeth clamped on something that twitched once and went still. It was a hair, or what used to be. The thing about the trap wasn't that it was old. It wasn't. The metal was clean, polished, set recently. Lorne, someone baited this, and not long ago. Marcus, yeah, but they weren't expecting a rabbit. Before either could move, the cold air shifted. It wasn't a breeze. It was displacement, the subtle shift of air when someone steps into your space. Marcus swung his light toward the tunnel entrance. Empty, and yet the sense of being watched grew heavier, like the darkness had mass and was leaning in on them. Lorne caught it first, a faint reflection, high on the left wall, barely visible through the shadows. She raised her light and saw it, a small lens embedded in the stone, a camera, and directly below it, almost lost in the rock's texture, a second lens, infrared. Lorne, we're being watched. Marcus, yeah, and I think, Lorne, we're being herded. The tunnel behind them was too quiet now, the kind of quiet that made your body want to run, even when your brain was still catching up. Marcus kept his voice low. Marcus. If the chain in that chamber was bait, and the wall of names was a warning, Lorne, then we're exactly where they want us. The camera's tiny red light flickered once, and somewhere deeper in the cave, something answered with a sound that didn't belong underground. A low, deliberate click followed by the faint scrape of metal on stone. Lorne didn't need Marcus to translate. It was the sound of a bolt-action rifle being cycled. They moved, fast, not running, but walking with the kind of speed you use when you know any sudden movement could set something off. Their beams scanned for exits, but the cave seemed to close around them. Every tunnel fork they passed had been blocked, some by recent rockfall, others by crude wooden barriers lashed with fresh rope, and every path forward seemed narrower, as if the stone itself was funneling them toward something. At the third fork, Marcus stopped, his light had caught something smeared on the rock. A dark streak, tacky and wet. He touched it, then pulled his hand back. Blood, still warm. Before Lauren could speak, the radio at Marcus's belt hissed. No one was on the other end, just a faint, rhythmic pattern. 3 short bursts. Pause. 3 long. Pause. 3 short again. Lauren, SOS? Marcus. But not from us. The signal was too clean, too intentional, to be coming from deep rock interference. Someone inside the cave was sending it, and that meant one of 2 things. Either a victim was still alive, or the hunter wanted them to think so. The clicking sound came again, closer now, followed by a long, scraping drag along the stone floor. Marcus's stomach tightened. That wasn't a rifle anymore. That was something being pulled, something heavy. The beam of his flashlight finally caught it. A shadow moved, too big to be human, its edges jagged with gear and protrusions. In the instant before it slipped back into darkness, Marcus saw a glint of metal at its side, and what looked like a full-body harness. Lauren, tell me you didn't just see. Marcus, I saw it. The next sound wasn't mechanical. It was a voice. Not booming. Not loud. Just there. Calm. Measured. And far too close. Step carefully. Some of these traps aren't meant for killing. Marcus's gut told him that was the worst thing they'd hear all night, because it meant the hunter was here, in the dark, between them and the way out. The voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. It slid across the cold air like oil, coating every inch of the cave in something slick and unshakable. Marcus and Lauren turned in unison, but their flashlights caught only fragments. A ripple of movement, a curve of shadow, a glint of glass where an eye should be. The hunter was wearing a mask. Not a ski mask, not anything tactical. It was bone-white, porcelain-like, with a faint crack running from temple to jaw, and through the right eye socket, the smallest of red lights pulsed. A camera. Marcus, you've been filming us. Hunter, soft chuckle, not just you, everyone who comes here. You wouldn't believe the things people do when they think the dark is theirs. Lauren took a slow step forward, her hand lowering toward the holster at her side. The hunter tilted his head. The porcelain face reflected her light in a cold, unwavering gleam. Hunter, I wouldn't. From the shadows at his back came the sound of something dragging. Chains over stone. The source emerged just enough for Marcus to see it. A crude steel cage. Its bars bent inward like whatever had been inside had tried, and failed, to break free. Inside was a pile of fabric. Not random scraps. Clothes. Children's clothes. Marcus felt his pulse thundering in his neck. Marcus. Where are they? Hunter. Which ones? The way he said it, as if there had been many, made the air feel thinner. Lauren. Emily. Sophie. Tell us what happened. The hunter stepped forward into full view. He wasn't large, but the way he moved erased the advantage of size. Measured, controlled, like every step had already been planned, and they were just playing catch-up. Hunter, you don't get it. You came here thinking you'd rescue them, but you've already stepped into their story. The cave doesn't let you walk back out. Marcus's hand tightened around his light. Marcus. Then what does it want? Hunter. An ending. The lights in the cave changed. Not brighter, but the shadows shifted, as if something far behind the hunter had begun to glow. Figures moved in the periphery. 3, 4, more, all in masks, all silent, and somewhere deeper still, a child's voice called out, soft, almost singing. Lauren's stomach dropped. It was Emily's voice. The hunter took a final step forward, until his cracked porcelain face filled Marcus's light beam. Hunter, if you want her, you'll have to keep going. But every step takes something from you, something you won't get back. And with that, he simply stepped aside. The tunnel behind him yawned open, a black mouth swallowing all trace of light. And from somewhere within, Emily's voice called again. This time, she said Marcus's name. And that is where the trail ends. No answers that bring comfort. No justice that feels complete. Only the echo of voices you can't unhear. If you felt the cold breath of this story on your neck, if you want more tales that crawl under your skin and stay there, subscribe, because the darkness never sleeps. And neither do we.